She just wanted to get up to the 28th floor to sign some papers. She was wearing a simple sweatshirt, her hair tied up in a messy bun, and carrying a battered briefcase. When the elevator opened in the main lobby of the Holden Tower, she stepped inside, not knowing what would happen. 3 men in suits were already inside, laughing loudly. One of them looked her up and down and wrinkled his nose. "This elevator is not for cleaning," he said. The others laughed. "Go down and use the service one." "This one is reserved." She fell silent. "Hey, can you hear me? Get down now." When she hesitated, he pressed the emergency button. The elevator stopped. "Either get out, or I'll call security." Then the door opened. A security guard recognized her and asked in a firm voice, "Should I take you out, ma'am?" The laughter died down. She didn't say a word. She just looked into the eyes of the man who had humiliated her, and his world began to crumble. In the president's office, the papers awaited her. Signature: the final purchase of the entire building. After years of silence, she was back. The building where her mother cleaned stairs with her injured hands now belonged to her. And the man in the elevator? He was the son of the executive who had made her family cry. But what no one knew was that she didn't want revenge. She just wanted to observe. She wanted to see who still laughed at the pain of others. She wanted to know who deserved to stay, and who should be remembered for what they did to those who couldn't defend themselves. When the millionaire discovered that the new owner was precisely the girl he had humiliated in the elevator, it was too late. She had already signed everyone's fate. And the justice she carried didn't shout, didn't punish. She just observed and made decisions in silence. She just watched and decided in silence. If this story has already caught your attention so far, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. There's still a lot to come, and you won't want to miss it. The Holden Tower was a landmark in Manhattan. 28 floors of glass, steel, and vanity. Everything there gleamed: the imported marble lobby, the receptionist's perfectly aligned uniforms, the leather shoes that never touched a puddle. Anyone who walked through that door already knew. Only those with a name, money, or surname strong enough to open doors before even knocking would stay. Inside, everything was about appearances, and no one liked to maintain that. Fair appearance as much as Derek Holden, the heir to the empire. Young, handsome, sarcastic, owner of a smile that charmed and a sharp tongue that destroyed. Everyone wanted to be around him, but not out of affection, out of fear, or out of convenience. Derek liked to test limits. He couldn't stand common people. He had a cruel gift for identifying who didn't belong in that world and making that very clear with just one sentence. On the 28th floor, his office looked like a showcase of power. Suspended glass table, a white leather chair, minimalist works of art, and a coffee that only he could afford. There, decisions involving millions were made between one sip and another, without anyone daring to disagree. That morning, however, something subtle changed. The mood had been strange since early. The receptionist was whispering in the corner to security. 2 shareholders had shown up without an appointment, and rumors were circulating in the hallways about a new acquisition. No one knew for sure who the buyer of the building was, only that the deal had been made in secret, and that by the end of the day, Holden Tower would have a new name. But for Derek, that didn't matter. He still thought everything in the building revolved around him. Until at 10:12 a.m., he stepped into the elevator with 2 colleagues and saw the door open to someone who didn't belong there. A young woman in faded jeans, a loose-fitting blouse, a worn backpack, and a calm gait. She didn't look lost. But she didn't look rich either. And in this world, that was enough to make her invisible. Or worse, unwanted. Derek sized her up with his eyes, gave his friends a dismissive nod, and whispered something that made her look down. They laughed. It was the kind of moment he loved, reasserting his dominance, making it clear who was in charge. But what he didn't know, and could never have imagined, was that this girl had been there before. In silence, in the hallways, on the emergency stairs, in the back of the conference rooms, seeing everything, noting every face, memorizing every name, and waiting for the right day. One false step in that elevator would change everything, because sometimes life doesn't tell you when the tables are turned. It just puts everyone in the same place. and watches who will show their true colors. Her name was Evelyn Grace. No one there remembered that name, but it had been engraved on the lobby of Holden Tower long ago, when she was just a shadow following in her mother's footsteps. Donna Grace had been cleaning the stairs, elevators, and offices in that building since Evelyn was 6. She would come by subway before sunrise with a tired smile and her rough hands covered in holey gloves. Evelyn would sit on an old chair in the maintenance room, drawing on scraps of paper that her mother would bring out of the trash. Sometimes she would fall asleep on the janitor's lap. Other times, she would hide near the trash cans to listen in on conversations of people who didn't even know she existed. She grew up among brushes, rags, and buckets, learning to be invisible. But she saw everything. The contempt in the eyes of some employees, the muffled laughter when someone stepped on the freshly cleaned floor, the words her mother would swallow silently every time she was treated like part of the furniture. Evelyn never forgot it, not even the day her mother arrived with red eyes and said she had been asked to leave because someone complained that she let her daughter run around too much. It was true, Evelyn had snuck up to the 28th floor once before. She wanted to see where the bosses were. She saw shiny rooms, white chairs, paintings she didn't understand. She saw a boy her age wearing a small suit and yelling at a babysitter. It was Derek. He didn't see her, but she never forgot that cold look. After the layoffs, life got even harder. They were evicted. They slept in shelters. They ate whatever they could. Evelyn studied in public. Libraries borrowed donated books and secretly asked her mother for help. One day she saw her mother cleaning a restaurant in the middle of the night and swore to herself that this would not be the end. She began selling candy, then used clothes, then courses that she created with what she had learned on her own. Years later, a woman from rural Georgia, called only E.G., began appearing on investor forums, discreet, quiet, but sharp as a blade. She bought stocks that no one wanted. She invested in bankrupt companies. She rebuilt businesses and sold them at a profit. By the age of 28, Evelyn owned 4 companies on behalf of others. By the age of 30, she was about to sign the biggest acquisition of her life. When she learned that the Holden Tower would be quietly auctioned off after an internal financial scandal, she didn't hesitate. She saw it as a calling, not for revenge, but for something deeper, a chance to see up close those who continued to despise the invisible. She wanted to walk the halls like before, but this time without having to hide. She wanted to go up in the elevator in front and see with her own eyes who would have the courage to tell her to get off. Evelyn didn't want to shout. She didn't want to be noticed. She just wanted to come in, listen, observe. Because those who grow up in silence learn to recognize those who talk too much. In the glass room suspended on the 28th floor, Derek leaned back in his white chair, slowly rotating with his coffee in his hand. Around him, his closest colleagues laughed loudly at something he had just said. The morning was like any other, full of vanity, noise, and small cruelties disguised as jokes. It was then that Noah, the most arrogant of the group, threw out a provocation, one of those they used to pass the time when they were bored with luxury. "Let's see who can get a poor man out of the building the fastest." Everyone laughed. Derek smiled without hesitation. "You have to be elegant," he said. "No cursing, just look, measure, and suggest that he doesn't belong." The game was simple. Each person would discreetly film their intervention and send it to the private group called, ironically, Elevator Elite. Whoever was the cruelest without raising their voice won. "How about today?" someone suggested. 11 o'clock sharp in the tower. Derek accepted, and as always, I wanted to be first. In his mind, it was just another game, another way to reassert his dominance. He got into the elevator at 10:58 a.m., along with 2 of the players. They laughed and talked loudly about cryptocurrencies, Swiss watches, and dinners with actresses. When the elevator door opened in the lobby, everyone saw the young woman entering. She looked out of place. She wore regular clothes, no visible makeup, and worn sneakers. But there was something in her eyes that bothered him. Derek identified her as the perfect candidate. He leaned against the side, adjusted his jacket, and launched his first attack. "This elevator is not for cleaning." His friends laughed. Evelyn didn't answer. She just pressed the button for the floor. "Hey, did you hear me? You're lost. Or did you go up to ask for a job?" he insisted. More laughter. Evelyn stood still. Derek approached and smiled with that tone that mixed charm and venom. "There's a service elevator, honey. This one is for people who work with ties, not with brooms." And it was at that moment that he discreetly pulled out his cell phone and started recording. The plan was to send the video with the caption, "Cleaning the social elevator." But Evelyn didn't react as expected. Instead of going down, she stood there, staring at the elevator buttons. She didn't say a word. Her silence was more disturbing than any scream. Derek pressed the emergency button, stopping the elevator from going up. "Either you get out, or we'll take this up with security." At that moment, the door opened unexpectedly. A tower security guard came in, looked at Evelyn, and with a straight posture said, "Should I get you out, ma'am?" The world seemed to freeze, the laughter stopped. Derek's eyes widened. "What?" he stammered. Evelyn didn't answer. She took a small step forward, looked directly at him, and pressed the button for the 28th floor with the delicacy of someone who knows exactly where she's going. In the group chat, no one laughed. The video was sent, but it quickly disappeared. The game was over before it even started, but Derek still had no idea who he had messed with. All he knew was that for once his laugh wouldn't be the last. The elevator rose in absolute silence. The men didn't know where to look. Derek stared at the floor numbers lighting up one by one, as if each floor he passed was taking away some of the control he'd always had. Evelyn was still motionless, her hands folded over her briefcase. She didn't shake. She didn't look away. She didn't smile. She just watched. When the door opened on the top floor, she was the first to step out. The security guard followed her as if he were her personal bodyguard. The others hesitated for a few seconds before following, unsure of what to do. In the main hallway, Evelyn walked slowly, her low heels echoing on the marble like hammers. Derek's secretary jumped to her feet. The conference room is ready, Miss Grace." The girl barely looked up. Evelyn just nodded and kept walking. The name Grace echoed in Derek's mind like a whisper from the past. But he still couldn't connect the dots. I still thought it was a coincidence, until he saw her stop in front of the executive suite that, for years, had been his absolute territory. She walked in and sat at the head of the conference table, and silence fell over everyone. A team of lawyers appeared behind her. Suited men who had treated Derek as a priority until yesterday were now standing and waiting for Evelyn to give them permission to sit down. She calmly opened her briefcase, took out a contract that was over 20 pages long and placed it on the table. "The acquisition is complete," she said without looking up. "Today the building changes hands, and so do the rules." Derek took a step back. He wanted to speak, but his throat was dry. Noah and the other colleagues backed away discreetly, like rats abandoning ship. Evelyn continued, "The previous management will be terminated. All departments will undergo immediate restructuring." Someone whispered something about rules and countermands, but she didn't respond. She just looked up, as if recognizing the ceiling she had seen from below. Derek tried to compose himself. He walked into the room with his hands in his pockets, pretending to be casual. "I'm sorry, but who exactly do you think you are to do all this? Did you think you were going to come up here with that briefcase and become the ruler of the world?" Evelyn looked at him calmly. There was something in those eyes that disarmed him. She didn't raise her voice. She just answered, "No, I didn't go up, I came back." That unnerved him. "Back? From where?" he asked, laughing nervously. Evelyn crossed her arms. "From the place you've never looked, down there, where dignity isn't measured by a suit." The silence was sharp, but she wasn't done yet. She stood up, took an old badge from the briefcase and placed it on the table. It was crumpled with the name Donna Grace Cleaning engraved on it. Derek recognized it immediately and froze. Evelyn continued. "She was cleaning this building with her injured hands. I was the girl who was waiting outside and who you told to leave like you did today." For a moment, no one breathed. The revelation fell like an avalanche on everyone. But she didn't scream. She didn't apologize, and she didn't accuse. She simply picked up her badge and left the room with the same silence she had brought with her. But there, in that marble corridor, the world was beginning to change, and no one could pretend they hadn't seen it anymore. The news spread through the building like wildfire. Within hours, everyone knew the new owner of Holden Tower was a young, discreet woman with a past linked to cleaning the building itself. The hallways that had previously been pulsating with laughter and hurried footsteps were now filled with whispers, averted glances, and an almost palpable tension. Evelyn walked through them in silence, observing every corner, every face. He didn't carry a grudge, but he did carry a memory. And that, in itself, was more frightening than any declared punishment. Derek, however, refused to accept reality. For him, this was just a temporary provocation, a media ploy. He thought that soon the lawyers would put everything in its place. He was used to seeing the world turn in his favor, and when it turns against him, the first reaction of someone who has never fallen is to try to scream louder. That same afternoon, Evelyn showed up at the building's panoramic restaurant, the most exclusive place in the tower, frequented only by executives and guests. She was dressed as simply as ever. She didn't want to draw attention to herself, but her presence alone was already uncomfortable. As soon as she walked in, some people stood up. Others looked away. Derek was sitting at the central table, surrounded by 4 colleagues and a glass of white wine. When he saw her, he lifted his chin as if he still had some control, and when she walked past him in silence, he felt provoked. "Hey!" he called. Loudly. Everyone stopped. Evelyn turned slowly. Derek smiled mockingly. "If you want, I can show you where the employee menu is. Or, do you want to eat with us now?" One of the men next to him chuckled softly. Evelyn stared at him and said nothing. The waiter approached her nervously. "Miss Grace, would you like to sit down?" Derek interrupted him. "She can use the dining room, right? I think that's where the cleaning guests eat." A tense silence fell over the restaurant. Evelyn walked calmly to his table. She stopped beside him, looked at the waiter and said, "Bring some tea, please, but don't rush over. I'm in no hurry." Then she looked at Derek. "You're uncomfortable. That's normal. The place feels different when you realize you've never had control over anything, doesn't it?" His smile faded. He tried to laugh, but it sounded forced. "You're playing power games, aren't you? This will pass. These things always do." Evelyn leaned in a little, just enough for him to hear without anyone else hearing. "You humiliated me in the elevator, just like you did to dozens before me. Only now the elevator is mine, and you keep trying to press buttons that no longer work." She straightened up, gave a slight smile, and left. She didn't need to shout. She didn't need to point. She just left. But there, in that restaurant where for years the humble had never set foot, a public humiliation was reversed, and the silence made it clear. The shame was now his. The next morning, Evelyn Siu arrived before work. The building was still waking up, with the lights in the hallways being turned on one by one, and the first sounds of the printers echoing in the emptiness. She walked alone, without an escort, without noise. The elevators were temporarily shut down for maintenance. Evelyn used the stairs. She wanted to feel the path her mother walked every day, carrying buckets, mops, and silent pain. When she reached the 28th floor, the lobby was empty. Only the receptionist, an eager young woman, always helpful, offered a coffee and a smile. Evelyn accepted. You entered your office. You took a deep breath, and then, for the first time, you opened an envelope that you had kept for more than 15 years. Inside were your mother's pay stubs, newspaper clippings with hushed complaints, and a handwritten letter from Donna Grace, never delivered, addressed to the former owner of Holden Tower. It was an apology for having gone up with your daughter to the top floor on a Saturday to show her the boss's floor. It was after this that she lost her job. Evelyn read it over again. Then she picked up her cell phone and sent a group email. She called all the managers to a meeting at 2 p.m. No explanations, no agenda, just a time and the signature, Evelyn Grace, owner. By the time the clock struck 2 p.m., the conference room was full. Tense faces, speculative glances, muted whispers. Derek arrived last, wearing sunglasses, as if he still wanted to make his presence felt. But she didn't look at him. She just started. For years, this building ignored history. It stepped on people with simple names. It ignored those who held the ground while those above danced. No one moved. She opened her folder, took out her mother's documents, the clippings, and laid them all on the table. I knew everything, from the beginning. Every name, every room, every face. She pointed to the managers, one by one. You never saw me, but I was here, with my mother. When she cleaned up vomit from the floor and was called invisible. When you laughed while she cried hiding on the stairs. One of the directors cleared his throat nervously. Evelyn continued. For years, I've been picking up pieces of what you destroyed. And today, I didn't come to give it back. I came to transform it. She looked at Derek. And you always knew how to humiliate. You always knew how to laugh. But you never knew how to listen. And now you'll have time. He smiled, trying to be dismissive. Are you going to fire me, is that it? She answered firmly, No, I'm going to leave you here in the same position, without any power. No one will listen to you anymore, and that's what hurts the most for those who always shouted. The room remained silent. She gathered up the papers, looked at everyone one last time and said, I'm not here to take revenge. I'm here to remember that everything you plant comes back, and sometimes it comes back through the elevator in front. She left as she had entered, in silence, but in that space each word would continue to echo, because when the truth is spoken calmly, it hurts more deeply than any scream. Derek spent the rest of the day trying to pretend that nothing had happened to him. He walked through the halls as if he were still the same, but the looks had changed. The smiles had disappeared. The greetings were now hesitant. He heard his name whispered and felt doors closing behind him. For the first time, he was inside the building and outside the circle. It was eating away at him, but he still didn't understand the true size of the abyss he had fallen into. He needed answers. He needed to know who, in fact, was this woman who had invaded his territory and changed all the rules without raising her voice. That night he walked into the company's file room. I knew that before the digitization was complete, the old data was still stored on paper. He rummaged through filing cabinets, dusty folders, forgotten records, until he found what he was looking for, old cleaning contracts. He flipped through them until he found the name that haunted him. Donna Grace. There she was. And then something else. A 3x4 photo clipped together. The woman was smiling resignedly, her eyes tired, her hair pulled back in a net. Behind the photo was a handwritten note from a former supervisor. Excellent employee but recurring problem. Brings young daughter to building. Derek stopped. A pang sank into his chest. Next. To the mother's name, scrawled in pen, was the daughter's name. Evelyn Grace, age 6, seen on 28th floor without permission. It hit him like an avalanche. The girl from the past was the woman from the present, the same one he had despised, the same one you saw and ignored so many times, thinking it wasn't worth a second of your attention. Memories came rushing back. He remembered a little girl hiding behind a pile of boxes one Saturday when he visited his father. He remembered hearing low voices, asking for silence and running footsteps when someone approached. He even remembered an episode when he spilled soda on the white carpet in the executive office and blamed it on the cleaning lady when his father asked. At the time, no one questioned him. His name was worth more than any truth. But now she was there, not as the employee's daughter, not as the invisible girl, but as the woman who controlled the entire building. Derek sat in the chair in the old file room. He was alone, surrounded by papers and silence. For the first time he felt small, not because of the money, but because of the lack of memory. He had never wondered about the people who kept the floors clean, who changed the trash in the rooms, who smiled even when they were ignored. And now one of those people was his boss, or worse, she was the one who decided whether he would stay there. He picked up Evelyn's mother's old name tag, which someone had left pinned to a report. He ran his fingers over the Naaman thought about what she must have gone through. He thought about the girl who had watched everything silently. He thought about how many times he had made fun of someone just for not having a fancy last name. This revelation wasn't just a shock, it was an internal downfall. And he knew, even if he didn't want to admit it, he would never step into that elevator the same way again. The next morning, Evelyn's chair was empty. Her secretary tried to explain to callers that she was in off-site meetings, but there were no meetings scheduled. No company drivers were requested, no emails were sent, no trace of her, just silence. She simply disappeared. At first, the employees breathed a sigh of relief. They thought maybe she was gone. Maybe she had gotten what she wanted. But as the days passed, the mood began to change. Her absence left an awkward space in the hallways, as if something essential was out of place. The structure continued to function, the elevators going up and down, the coffee being served, the papers being circulated. But there was an echo on every floor, as if someone was about to enter and didn't, as if her presence had rearranged the atmosphere, and now her absence revealed the emptiness that was real. Derek noticed first, not because I missed him, at least not yet, but because the eyes of others were on him again, not with respect, but with something closer to compassion. Or worse, silent contempt. He realized that without Evelyn there, no one feared him anymore. The colleagues he had lunch with started making coffee dates without him. The security guards stopped opening doors for him. Even the driver, who had been punctual and obliging before, now made him wait. It was as if the world had understood that his presence no longer defined the spaces, and at the center of this change was her silence. A silence that said more than any gesture. On the third morning without Evelyn, Derek walked into his office and found her briefcase on the desk. There was no lock, no note. Just a flower pressed between papers, a white dahlia. He didn't understand it at first, but as he leafed through the documents, he found something he'd never expected. Drawings, childhood sketches, handwritten in blue pen on yellowed paper. It was her, Evelyn as a child, drawing elevators, hallways, rooms. In the corner of one of them, a sentence written in crooked letters. "Someday, I'll go up to the top floor with Mommy." Derek felt his throat close up. This wasn't an attack. It was a reminder of who she was, where she came from, and of everything he'd never been able to see. He began to look for her, discreetly. He sent formal, cold messages, trying to keep the tone professional. He called the lawyers, the directors, even the old cleaning company now closed. No one knew where she was. Some said she had traveled. Others said she just needed some time. But the truth is that no one knew anything. And the building, now full of faces that didn't dare speak, seemed to await her return as if she were essential to the place's breathing. For the first time, Derek noticed the absence, not of the authoritative presence he had expected, but of the calm she brought, of the steady gaze, of the silence full of meaning. He realized that he had grown accustomed to expecting something from her every day, a gesture, a look, a decision. And now, with her gone, he felt suspended, as if the elevator was stuck between floors with no button to make it go up or down, just there, waiting, not knowing how much longer he could endure without the only person who had forced him to see what he had become. It took just 7 days for the silence to turn into a scandal. It all started with an old video forwarded by a former employee of Holden Tower. It was a recording of the elevator, the scene in which Derek told Evelyn to go down and use the service one. The video, which had previously been circulating in a private group as an inside joke, was now circulating on social media with outraged captions, "The millionaire who humiliated the building's new owner." The image went viral. News sites replicated it with headlines like, "Holden executive throws woman out of elevator without knowing she bought the building." And that was enough for the mask to fall. Comments started pouring in. People from all over shared similar stories, talking about the silent humiliations suffered by people like Derek. In a short time, he became a symbol of what the world had grown tired of applauding: unpunished arrogance, spoiled airs, and power without compassion. The first consequences came in the form of distancing, sponsors of events that had his presence asked for his name to be removed. Brands that had been associated with the tower sent public statements disassociating themselves. Influencers recorded videos reacting to the episode, condemning the behavior and calling for a boycott. But the hardest blow came from within. The Holden Group board, pressured by the negative repercussions, removed Derek from all public representations of the brand. He would no longer be the young face of the empire, or any face at all. He began to occupy a tiny room in the back of the building that he once considered his kingdom, and even there shame followed him. Employees avoided contact. Elevators stopped before he entered on purpose. The coffee came cold. The hallways, once full of sycophants, were now empty of any smiles. Derek tried to justify himself. He fired off emails to the directors, trying to convince them that the video had been taken out of context, that it was just a joke, that no one could have predicted who she was. But the answers didn't come, and the looks on the faces of the few who still passed by him didn't show anger. They showed indifference, which, for someone like him, hurt more than any punishment. The night the TV story aired, titled "From Cleaning to Power," the woman who bought the building where she was. Humiliated, Derek watched it alone. On the couch in his luxury apartment that now seemed bigger than ever, he stared at the screen without blinking. Evelyn was walking through the building, silent, steady, her image frozen at the exact moment the security guard asked her, "Should I take it off, Mom?" That was the caption of the report. He turned off the television, looked at his hands, and felt for the first time that the world around him wasn't wrong. He was the one who had been blind all along. And the worst part was knowing that even if she came back, nothing he said would change what everyone now knew. The days that followed the fall were longer than any winter Derek had ever faced. For the first time, he woke up with nowhere to run, no calendar full of false commitments, no invitations to dinners or exclusive meetings. The phone that had once rang incessantly was now just a cold block on the table, and the mirrors in his apartment, once his accomplices in vanity, became silent judges. He saw himself there day after day as he really was, a man who had built an image on the contempt of others. And now, naked of applause, he would have to deal with who he had become. At first, he resisted. He tried to return to his old routine. He walked up to the tower a few times, hoping it was all just a collective nightmare that would soon dissipate. But the world no longer looked at him with reverence, and he was also beginning to see the world with different eyes. Without Evelyn around, he felt that something fundamental had been taken away from him, and it wasn't power. It was her firm, silent presence, which challenged him without needing to threaten, who looked at him without fear, who spoke the truth without shouting, and above all, who never reacted with hatred, even though she had every reason to do so. One rainy morning, Derek went down to the lobby of his apartment building and walked for blocks to a community center in Brooklyn. It was a place he passed by every day and had never noticed before. There he surrendered to the silence. He sat on a wooden bench and listened to voices sharing stories. They were men and women who cleaned offices, served coffee, cared for the elderly, each one with invisible marks. And there among them, Derek was not the fallen millionaire. He was just someone trying to hear for the first time. It was there that he met Clara, a 60-year-old woman who told him how a simple good morning made a difference on the night shift, or Miguel, a former cook who now taught young people how to prepare meals with dignity. Derek didn't talk much. He just listened, and that, little by little, changed him. He came back the next day, and the day after that, and the day after that too. He started helping out with small tasks, sweeping the floor, handing out blankets, packing lunches. No one there knew his last name, and for the first time, he liked it. He felt light. He felt useful, something he had never experienced even when he was sitting at million-dollar tables. The hands that had once carried contracts now carried boxes of donations. The eyes that had only sought approval now sought to learn. And the feet, which had always stepped with arrogance, now touched the ground with humility. One day he lay down on the bench in the same center and saw, stuck on the wall, a small poster with the following phrase, A man's height is measured by how he treats those who don't need him. He felt a lump in his throat. He thought of Evelyn. And he understood that maybe she hadn't disappeared. She had just given him space to discover what it was like to fall and start over from scratch. It was on a cloudy, almost colourless Tuesday that Evelyn returned to Holden Tower. No one could explain how she had arrived. No entry was recorded, no prior notice was given. She simply appeared in the lobby as if she had never left. She was wearing a long, dark coat, her hair tied up as simply as ever, and her gaze was more serene than before. The receptionist jumped to her feet. The security guard respectfully stepped aside, but Evelyn walked slowly. She climbed the stairs to the 28th floor. She passed through corridors where each door seemed to contain frozen memories. She stopped in front of the conference room. It was empty. She rested her hand on the wood of the door, took a deep breath, and entered. Meanwhile, downstairs, Derek was arriving. He didn't come every day, but he still occupied his small office in the back. He had stopped trying to prove anything. He just kept to his schedule, read reports, kept his head down. When he entered the lobby, the atmosphere was different. People were whispering, but not like before. It was a kind of subdued attention, as if something important was happening. Then he heard, "Mrs. Evelyn is in the building." His heart skipped a beat. He didn't run, but he didn't hesitate either. He climbed the stairs, feeling the weight of each step. When he reached the top floor, he saw the door to the conference room ajar. And he knew. She was there. Evelyn was sitting at the head of the table, alone, in front of a glass of water and a closed folder. When he entered, she looked up. No fright, no surprise, just the recognition of someone who had been waiting for this moment. Derek stood in the doorway, hesitant. He seemed smaller, thinner, but his eyes were clearer. "You're back," he said, almost in a whisper. She nodded. For a little while. The silence between them was not heavy. It was necessary, as if each silent second was correcting years of useless noise. He walked over to her without sitting down. "I looked for you." She looked at him steadily. "You didn't have to." Derek lowered his eyes. "I didn't know. Not everything. And even if I had, I think I would have done the same, because that's who I was." Evelyn listened without interrupting. He continued, "But I'm not anymore. Or, I'm trying not to be." He ran his hands through his pockets. Nervously. "I went to the community center. I listened to stories. I helped. No one recognized me. And that's when I realized how blind I was." Evelyn took a deep breath. "What do you expect from me now, Derek?" The question was direct, straightforward. He took his time, and then with raw honesty he answered, "Nothing, just let you know that I finally saw, you, your mother, what I destroyed with the words I called her as a joke, and that I really don't want to go back to who I was." She looked at him. Long. There was something in her eyes that wasn't anger or immediate forgiveness. It was just truth. After a few seconds, she said calmly, "I didn't come to be remembered. I came to remember. And now that you see, I can go." She stood up, picked up her briefcase and walked to the door. She walked past him as she had the first time, with the dignity of someone who didn't need to prove anything. But before she went down the stairs, she turned around. "Derek, thank you for coming all this way. Most people never come up." And then with a slight wave, she disappeared once more. 2 days later, Derek received a white envelope on his desk. No sender, no logo, just his name, handwritten in calm script. He hesitated before opening it. His hands, once steady, now trembled at the simplest gestures. When he finally broke the seal, he found a single sheet of paper with a handwritten letter. The words were few, but chosen with precision. Sometimes, forgiveness doesn't need to be said. It reveals itself in the silence of those who no longer carry pain. I don't come back to change the past. I come back to make sure the present doesn't repeat it. I follow my path, not by distance, but by purpose. Evelyn. Derek read and reread the message as if trying to hear something behind the words, and indeed he heard. It wasn't a request, it wasn't a promise, it was a decision, clear, firm, unadorned. The next morning, I learned from a legal clerk that Evelyn had stepped down as administrative director of the tower. She had appointed a new board, made up in part of women who had started out as cleaners, receptionists and assistants. She had left quietly, the way she always arrived, without fanfare, without speeches. But the impact of her presence would remain, not in the gilded brass plaques or the air-conditioned rooms, but in the way everyone began to look at each other more carefully, less hasty to judge. Derek didn't try to follow her, or write back. He understood that there were things that can't be fixed with words, that forgiveness isn't a prize to be asked for, but a consequence to be accepted, and most of all, that sometimes saying goodbye is the most generous way for someone to show that they believe in our change, even if they don't want to be a part of it. He stayed in the building, but at a different pace. He kept to his schedule, ate lunch in the cafeteria with the interns, offered coffee to the janitor, and listened to stories he had previously ignored. He no longer needed to be seen. He just needed to see. One afternoon, walking through the back of the building, he came across a former cleaning lady with tears in her eyes. He asked her why. She replied, "They put your mother's name on the plaque in the break room, the first time anyone remembers her." Derek just smiled, his chest tightening. The woman didn't know he was no longer the owner's son, but perhaps for the first time he knew exactly who he was. And that was enough. Months later, in an interview with a small local newspaper, Evelyn was seen coordinating a public housing project for at-risk women. When asked about the episode in the tower, she calmly responded, "Not everything needs to be fixed with presence. Some pains are healed with distance, and some memories become new ground for those who want to walk differently." She didn't say his name, nor did she tell her version of events. She just smiled slightly and changed the subject. And so, without fuss, she chose to leave. Not to run away, but to move on. Because the greatest act of justice sometimes is to simply walk away and leave the other person with the sound of their own conscience. It was late afternoon when Derek stepped alone into the main elevator of the Holden Tower. The lobby was empty, bathed in golden light streaming through the tall glass windows. He wore a simple shirt rolled up to the elbows, and in his hands he carried a small white flower, a dahlia. He pressed the button for the 28th floor and leaned against the mirrored wall. The floors rose slowly. At each stop, no one entered. Only the soft sound of the machine running filled the silence. When he reached the top, he stepped out and walked to the old conference room. It was locked. On the frosted glass of the door was a new sign: Grace Room, Memory and Reflection. He didn't go in. He just placed the flower at the foot of the door and walked away. Before he got back into the elevator, he noticed something on the wall next to it. A small painting with a handwritten phrase in a simple wooden frame: "Let no one have to shout to be seen." He stood there for several minutes, staring. Then he took a deep breath, touched the pocket where he kept his mother's old badge, and stepped down. Down below, the building continued to operate. People came and went, laughed, ran, life went on. But somewhere between the steps, the silences, and the unspoken words, something had changed. And no one got on that elevator anymore in the same way. If you've come this far, it's because this story touched you in some way, so write in the comments, "I saw what no one wanted to see." This way we'll know that you watched until the end, and that you felt every detail. Don't forget to like it now. It shows YouTube that this story deserves to reach more hearts. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next stories that will also touch you. And look, there's a video appearing here on the screen, right? Now click on it. It's strong, true, and maybe even more impactful than this one. Go there, I'll wait for you there.